Do you want to know the latest Canon EOS R1 leaked specifications? Are you tired of getting bits and pieces from the Camera Insider, Canon Rumors, and this channel? Well, in this video, I've collected all the reliable leaked specifications and, where possible, provided a forecast on what's missing. Want to know the price range, sensor, shipping dates, and other important specifications? Then stick around after this short message for all the details. But first, subscribe to this channel for a chance to win a Canon EOS R5. I'll be giving one away to one lucky subscriber once this channel reaches 100,000 subscribers. Anyone above the age of 18 with a valid mailing address is eligible. Additional terms and conditions are linked in the description down below. There's absolutely no doubt in our minds that the Canon EOS R1 will have a stacked full-frame sensor. The Canon EOS R3, a camera that was announced a few years ago, a professional high-grade camera. Well, it was Canon's first camera, or high-grade professional camera, first stills hybrid camera that actually had a stacked sensor. So it doesn't make sense that Canon's going to go ahead and release the R1 with anything less than a stacked sensor. But what about resolution? Well, in terms of resolution, Canon Rumors thinks it will either be 45 or 60 megapixels, giving you the option of shooting at multiple resolutions while still shooting RAW. So this new stacked sensor, this 45 or 60 megapixel stacked full-frame sensor, is definitely going to improve readout speeds, and it's going to reduce rolling shutter. But it's definitely a different architecture approach than, well, what Sony's doing with the recently announced Sony A9 Mark III. A global shutter definitely offers promise, but no one has yet developed a global shutter with a resolution that comes close to 50 megapixels. And a stacked sensor isn't outdated technology. In fact, one could argue that a global sensor is outdated technology. Back in the days before we had CMOS sensors, we had CCD sensors, which had a global shutter. Now, a global shutter isn't outdated, and it's not new technology either. It's Sony's application of that global shutter to the A9 III, and it produces instant readout speeds, and that's very useful. But on the downside, low light performance isn't as good, and dynamic range isn't as good. And of course, color rendition when shooting in low light isn't as good either. You see, each sensor has its applications, and a global shutter, well, it makes a lot of sense. We see this in various, well, RED cameras. The RED Komodo, for example, has a global shutter. But a stacked sensor isn't in any way out of date. And I think what we're going to see in the Canon EOS R1 is definitely better low light performance, dynamic range, and better color rendition in low light than we're going to see with the Sony A9 III. They're just different cameras for different applications. Moving along to high-speed continuous shooting, the Nikon Z9 can shoot 20 frames per second, lossless RAW, generating 1.2 gigabytes per second. We are willing to forecast that the Canon EOS R1 can reach a shooting speed, continuous shooting speed, of 30 frames per second. That's lossless RAW, and that would generate about 1.8 gigabytes per second. Now, to enable this, Canon could do a couple of things. They could add internal SSD or NVMe SSDs to be able to capture the information and hold it internally for a few seconds until the CF Express Type B card can handle it. But also, with Gen 4 recently announced, that would allow Canon to use Gen 4 CF Express Type B cards to be able to easily handle 1.8 gigabytes per second. Oh, and in terms of the shutter, it looks like the Canon EOS R1 is most likely going to keep a mechanical shutter as well as an electronic shutter. Too many pros out there don't want to see that mechanical shutter go away anytime soon. Now, when it comes to video, Canon Rumors and Petapixel both believe that the Canon EOS R1 will have 8K video. Yeah, we agree. I mean, I think that's a foregone conclusion, especially if it's going to have 45 megapixels. That allows 8K video, DCI, and UHD, and we believe that Canon's going to be able to take that 8K resolution and go past 30 frames per second, and even go past 60 frames per second that we see on the Nikon Z8 and the Nikon Z9. Now, it is possible Canon could stop at 8K 60, but what we think is going to happen here is that Canon's going to allow it to go all the way up to 8K at 120 frames per second, just like the Red V Raptor. And we believe that the Canon EOS R1 will allow dual recording to both CF Express Type B cards for both video and stills. This would give the Canon EOS R1 a jump on the Z8 and Z9, but is dependent on an all-new image processor. And we forecast that a new image processor will be included in the Canon EOS R1, as well as the Canon EOS R5. But with all this increased performance, Well, what about the autofocus system? Can it keep up? Actually, hold on a minute here. Before I get into the autofocus, we'll talk about that in just a moment. Let's talk about 4K video. Now, while none of the leaked specifications on any of the rumor sites out there are talking 4K video modes, we think it's pretty safe to forecast that the Canon EOS R1 will be able to do 8K oversample 4K at 24, 25, and 30, just like the Canon EOS R5 Mark I, but extend that up to 50 and 60 frames per second, and most likely 100 and 120 frames per second. However, we do believe that as you move up to 100 and 120 frames per second, the detail will fall off a little bit because that's an awful lot of information that's being pushed around. There's also a chance that Canon could increase the shooting rate at 4K past 120 frames per second, but we don't believe it's going to be 8K oversample 4K. We've heard one source tell us that it would go up to 180 frames per second, but we weren't able to validate that information, so we haven't put it out there. And of course, we've seen other rumors from less credible sources even indicating that Canon could go as high as 240 frames per second. Now, I'm not saying this isn't plausible, it's just we don't have anything validated. And what I'm focusing on here in this video is the validated information, the most reliable information that we have, and filling in the blanks by forecasting certain information. But now let's get back to the autofocus system. On June the 8th, Canon rumors said that the Canon EOS R1 will have an all-new autofocus system. Could this mean quad-pixel autofocus? We think it's very possible. There have been many patents about quad-pixel autofocus, and it's the next logical step. We agree. Canon files around 30 patents a day, and we've been covering those for the past, well, several years. And going back to 2020 is the first filing by Canon for quad-pixel autofocus. It was then later updated in 2022, this one here. And it's likely that Canon will draw on the technology in this patent to improve accuracy when shooting off angle. But now let's take a look at the LCD. Canon rumors said that the Canon EOS R1 will get a much larger OLED panel on the back of the camera. One source said, nothing currently out there has a screen as big as the EOS R1. That's somewhere north of 3.2 inches, perhaps going up to 4 inches. But we really hope that Canon actually provides us with a 4-axis LCD, like the same one in the Sony a7R5. It gives videographers a flip screen, but also it's perfect for sports and wildlife photographers, those of us that need to look down the barrel and hate looking out to the side. But now let's go back and revisit the CF Express cards. I think it's pretty safe to say that the Canon EOS R1 obviously is going to have dual CF Express card slots. The only question is it going to have CF Express Type B or CF Express Type C, or one of each? You see, there's a whole bunch of rumors going around, nothing that's been validated, that's talking about the Canon EOS R1 having a single CF Express Type C card slot. And even Canon rumors got in on the action, stating that one source said it's likely that at least one card slot is Type C. I don't believe it for a minute. I don't believe that the Canon EOS R1 is going to have a single CF Express Type C card slot. For one, pros don't like to mix and match. And the second reason is, well, for speed. You see, CF Express Type B is capable of reaching about 1.6 gigabytes per second. Angelbird has a CF Express Type B card that has a maximum sustained write speed of 1.48 gigabytes per second. That's essentially 1.5 gigabytes per second. But just a couple of months ago, the CF Express Association just approved Gen 4. All the information on this slide is for CF Express Gen 3. Type B has a theoretical maximum write speed of 2,000 megabytes per second, and the fastest on the market today is around 1.48 gigabytes per second. If we take a look at Gen 4, we can see those speeds double. Type B is now capable of 4,000 megabytes per second, while the real-world maximum sustained write speed is going to be somewhere around 3.6 gigabytes per second. So if you can provide me with a scenario where we can actually utilize those speeds, think of the Canon EOS R1, 45 megapixels. 45 megapixels shooting continuous RAW. Would you like to go up to 40 frames per second? Well, that would only require 2.4 gigabytes per second. Gen 4, CF Express Type B can go even further. What about 60 frames per second? You see, we start to get up into rather ludicrous speeds in terms of continuous RAW lossless shooting. And video? Well, I guess we could do 16K RAW if that's something you're interested in. It's a little bit bizarre, but I have a feeling I know where this came from. You see, back on April the 1st, I put out this video here, and it's all about the latest Canon EOS R1 specifications. And in that video, I didn't just talk about CF Express Type-C, I had one in my hand. And yes, this is an actual CF Express Type-C card. Don't ask me where I got it from, but you can see the form factor. You can see its size. You can see its thickness. Do you want two of these inside your Canon EOS R1 taking up precious space when a CF Express Type-B card, Gen 4, well, it can easily provide the same speeds as a Type-C card that's Gen 3. So now let's take a look at the EVF. On July the 10th, the Camera Insider said that the Canon EOS R1 is expected to boast one of the best, if not the best EVF on the market. The Canon EOS R1's EVF is anticipated to outperform the top-of-the-line EVF in the Canon EOS R3. And the specifications for the Canon EOS R1's EVF, well, it's going to have a 0.7-inch OLED display with a resolution of over 7 million dots and a refresh rate of 60 to 240 Hz that's blackout-free with a variable refresh rate and a brightness of 4,000 nits. Now, as far as the release date goes for the Canon EOS R1, it's been absolutely all over the place. We were supposed to get that camera announced back in 2022. Then it was 2023, and well, somewhere around May, June, we heard that the Canon EOS R1 was going to get pushed into 2024, and that's where we are today. Well, actually, just last month, on October the 16th, Canon Rumors said that we've been told by two sources to expect some kind of announcement in Q1 of 2024. Okay, so some kind of announcement, that is key right there. What does some kind of announcement mean? Well, we have an idea because we see Canon Rumors has already told us an announcement will be a drawn-out affair, which we think's a development announcement first, then getting the camera in the hands of pros to do final tweaks to firmware before the official announcement. The Paris Olympic Games begin in July of 2024, so we expect the Canon EOS R1 to be on the market by then, and that the event won't just be used for beta testing the final product. And if you want to know what a drawn-out announcement looks like, let's go back to 2020. In fact, January the 28th of 2020, that's when we got the first set of leaked specifications on the Canon EOS R5, and they were bang on. Everything was correct, right down to 8K RAW. It was all correct. But then about 4 or 5 weeks later, we got a development announcement by Canon. Then another 4 or 5 weeks later, Canon Australia put out more information validating what we've been told, and that the king is back. And then at NAB 2020, that's when Canon really let the specs out of the bag and said, yeah, 8K RAW, 24, 25, and 30 frames per second with autofocus, IBIS, all that, and we were all kind of gobsmacked. And I think that's what we're going to see with the Canon EOS R1. A slow tease, maybe as Canon Rumors has said, starting off with a development announcement, or maybe we'll even leak the specs before the development announcement, or maybe the Camera Insider will, or maybe Canon Rumors did, just like in 2020. That's what I'm hoping for. I want it to be long and drawn out. I'm excited to get this camera, and I don't want it to just be, here it is. I enjoy the lead up. Have you ever heard the expression? It goes back to Wall Street, that buy on rumor, sell on fact. And that's because rumors, the forecasting, everything leading up to the event is where things get really exciting. We have this sort of glass half full, this blue sky approach. And then once it's released, there it is. And okay, you know, it's like chasing something. Once you get it, it's like, okay, now what? And a drawn-out announcement like the one we have for the Canon EOS R5 tells us that Canon has a lot to tell us and a lot to be proud of. Remember the Canon Insider quote on the Canon EOS R1? The Canon EOS R1, to be a jack of all trades, a master of everything. And this camera isn't going to be made from anything in the parts bin. Sadly, nothing's been leaked in terms of price, so we're going to provide you with a price forecast, and I'm going to give you a range. Consider this a Class C estimate. One thing I want to talk about first is when it comes to the Canon 1 series camera, and this is going all the way back to the early 70s, is that when Canon releases a 1 series, sometimes they increase the price, sometimes they increase the price by a little, sometimes they increase it by a lot, and sometimes they actually decrease the price of the camera, and sometimes they decrease it by a lot. And that's significant because we see the Nikon Z9 as the closest current competitor to the Canon EOS R1. It sells for $5,500. We believe that Canon's paying more attention to the Z9 price And while we believe they will offer the R1 at a higher price, we don't believe that they're going to sell the R1 for anything close to something like $8,500. Without any validated leaked specs at this point, we see a forecast for the Canon EOS R1 somewhere between $64.99 to $71.99. But keep in mind here, these are also rumors. We don't have anything announced by Canon. And while we've done our best here to provide you with only the most reliable sources of information on leaked specifications regarding the Canon EOS R1, they are still rumors. They're not coming from the source themselves. And anything can change between now and when we get the announcement. And the shipping date is most likely going to be in Q2. A firmware update could add or remove capabilities, or they could do a last-minute hardware change, which we think is unlikely. But as information changes, as we get more leaked information, whether they be specs, images, or anything else, we'll provide you with that latest leaked information. So don't forget to subscribe and choose all notifications. But now there's just one thing I'd like to ask you to help me with. If you're looking at purchasing camera gear from Adorama, B&H, or Amazon.com, please consider using my affiliate links in the description down below, because they really do help this channel grow. I get a decent amount of income from your affiliate links, from purchasing gear. It doesn't add to the cost in any way whatsoever, but what that does is fund this channel and allow me to make really big purchases. For next year, for 2024, I can guarantee you that I'm going to be picking up the Canon EOS R1, the Canon EOS R5 Mark II. I've already put a pre-order in for the 200 to 800 millimeter, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's more lenses coming out. Plus, depending on what Panasonic, Nikon, and Canon does, I might pick up another body. I might even pick up, that's right, a non-Canon body. So thank you to everybody that has used my affiliate links. I really do appreciate it. And in just a couple of days, if you're looking at purchasing camera gear, I'm going to be doing a live stream. I'm insane here. I feel like one of those old city TV commercials where a guy comes on selling rugs and he goes, "I'm crazy," because I'm doing a 5-hour live stream starting at 7 o'clock in the morning, Toronto or New York time, and going till 12 o'clock. And this whole live stream is really, the theme of the live stream is what's in my camera bag. In particular, what's in my camera bag, but not just me as a videographer. I'm also going to have other people on that are videographers with Sony, that are Canon directors of photography. I'm also going to have various photographers, from photojournalists to wildlife photographers, and we're going to be asking them what's in their camera bag. And while they're talking about what's in their camera bag, I'm going to be bringing those items up on the screen while they're talking so you can see the latest and best prices from B&H and Adorama side by side. So please join me 7 o'clock in the morning on Friday. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Follow me on Twitter, because there's so much information coming out right now, and I have a feeling that come 2020, 2024, so much is coming out. We're going to get a lot of announcements from Fujifilm, from Panasonic, from Sony, and from Canon. I might end up having to take much of the month off. It's going to be absolutely crazy. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. Have yourself a great day, and we'll see you again soon.